Good evening to everyone. As the Global Head of Citizenship and Reputation at Barclays, it's my great pleasure to invite you to join us this evening for what I think promises to be a very lively and provocative debate on a very important topic. Clearly, the number of people who are here in the room, the number of people who are participating via live streaming suggests that this is a topic that matters to a lot of us. At Barclays, social responsibility is actually part of our DNA. We have evidence from one of our first board meetings over 300 years ago that our predecessors were debating how to contribute to charity and how to give back to society while still being successful as a business enterprise. At Barclays over the last 4 years, we've made some phenomenal strides. We've made great progress, and progress of which I think the team is rightly proud. Having said that, we know that there can and is a lot more we can do. We want to be more bold, we want to be more ambitious. We have within Barclays had a lot of energetic conversations around the role that business should play in society, the role that banks should play in society, and frankly, the whole evolution of the sustainability sphere. The debate series, we feel, provides exactly the right opportunity for us to get a platform together of well-renowned experts who can really add to the discussion and maybe provoke our thinking in some very different ways. So thank you very much for joining us. I look very much forward to hearing the thoughts of the panel, as well as encouraging you to participate in a Q&A that follows. And with that, I'll turn the podium back over to Matthew. And thank you, Matthew, for hosting us this evening.
Thank you. Okay, so keep voting as I speak. The genesis of tonight's debate was Michael Poulter's proclamation that CSR is dead and should be replaced with the new paradigm of creating shared value, CSV, an argument he made alongside tonight's speaker, Mark Kramer. The argument ran that CSR was a bolt-on to business strategy, primarily delivering reputational benefit. CSV, on the other hand, linked business strategy to societal needs, creating competitive advantage, and achieving large-scale social and environmental benefits. But not everybody agreed. John Elkington, our other keynote speaker this evening, in particular disputed the claim and questioned the way CSR was being defined as a defensive position rather than a more proactive approach. He went further to challenge creating shared value as yet more incrementalism, unable to deliver real sustainability, unable to truly deliver a triple bottom line. And it is a debate that has raged on ever since. But tonight, that debate will end. It's going to end tonight, folks. Tonight we will decide whether CSR is. People will say that debate. Oh, that finished in October 2015, London. That finished it. That was. That's gone now. There may be a plaque saying CSR died here, or even CSV died here. Who knows? So that's what we're going to be talking about this evening. Let me just tell you a bit about the format. Mark and John are going to speak for 7 minutes each, and we have asked them to do something very particular. We've asked them to identify what they think this debate is about, what they think the argument is about. So it'll be interesting to see whether they even agree what the argument is about. Then, throwing convention to the winds, rather than having our brilliant seconders speak, then we're going to then open it up to you. We want to hear your comments. Now, it's been described as a Q&A, but actually, normally in these positions, I say, don't make a little speech, ask a question. Reverse that. Do make a little speech, but make sure it's little. You know, tell us your view. And I'd be pleased if, when you speak, when I call you, start off by saying dead or alive, so I know where you're kind of coming from. I mean, not about yourself, obviously. I can kind of fathom that, I think. So tell us what your position is, and give us just one brilliant killer point for the debate. And then after we've listened to you for 15 or 20 minutes, then we're going to bring in Janet Voot and Patrick Thomas. And they've got the job of, they've got some other points that they want to make, but they're also, I think, going to try and respond to what they've heard from you and when you've heard from them, coming in respectively on behalf of Mark and John and their arguments. Then it'll be back to you for a bit more debate, and then we'll come back to me. And I'll whitter on for a couple of minutes while we collect more votes from you. Then there'll be final closing comments from Mark and John, summing all the debate up, trying to convince you without one last thing to vote for them. That voting will continue during that, and then we'll close it, and I will tell you the result of the evening, who has won the debate over whether CSR is dead. Is that Clear. Does everyone know what's happening? Right, brilliant. I should have in front of me the vote at this stage of the evening. Here it comes. Well, well, well. So, a certain number of votes have been cast, but I'm interested in proportions, and we have got a kind of agreement here that someone will send me up what the percentages are. I'm just standing here trying to work it out. Who's good at maths? How would you express 18 versus 16 mathematically as percentages? Can anyone do that?
A tie.
Ah.
A tie. Yeah.
What is 18 as a percentage of 34? Come on, you're really bright people. Sorry? 51% to 49%. Okay, all right, well, we'll do that then. So, it's at the moment, it's 51% for Team John and 49% for Team Mark. So, there we go.
Let's end it now. Let's go.
There we go.
Come on.
All right. Mostly, these people have no idea what they think. That's the important news for you, because they haven't voted, they're open-minded, they're ready to be swayed. So, there we go. Now, from Mark Kramer, telling us why CSV, what it is, what CSV is, how it is different. He is the founder and managing director of FSG. Please welcome Mark Kramer!
Thank you, Matthew, and good evening to all of you. Let me start with two caveats. The first, I have to say, being up here with John, that I have admired John for many years, and I have immense respect for the father of the triple bottom line and a man who has really led the sustainability movement and created massive change around the world. So I just want to be clear that while there are areas we disagree, it is with profound respect.
This can only go downhill.
The second caveat is I'm not sure I want to be represented as being the vote for the death of CSR. I definitely want to be the vote for the life of creating shared value, but I'm not sure that that means that CSR needs to be dead. In fact, I think CSR is necessary. It is merely not sufficient. And so I offer shared value not to replace and eradicate CSR, but to enable companies to play a more powerful role in social change than just CSR. Because at its core, I believe that CSR is about the idea of doing less harm. And companies do need to do less harm. But companies can also be tremendously important players in social progress. They have a role to play that does not replace government, does not replace civil society, but brings immense new resources and capabilities to the table to solving social problems, meeting needs, addressing environmental concerns. If we are going to create progress in meeting the needs of the world today, if we are going to find solutions to the social problems, I believe that they will be invented and propagated by companies. And I believe that this is the great strategic opportunity for the growth and profitability of companies going forward. So one place I think that John and I disagree is around the role of profit and the definition of profit. I think that John believes we need to reinvent accounting to take into account things that have no monetary value at the moment, to take into account the use of natural resources, the welfare of people, so that we can present as companies a bottom line that, frankly, is fictitious. It may be good for the world. It would be a nice thing if companies did that. But I believe companies respond to reality and real profit. And shared value says there is opportunity for real profit and improved bottom line by pursuing these new avenues, by taking into account your environmental footprint, but by taking into account also the new products you can create, the new populations you can serve in helping to meet social needs. And so I think that profit, as Michael Porter once said, profit is magic. Because if you can find a business model to solve a social problem that generates a profit, you can scale it. You can sustain it. You don't need to depend on government support. You don't need to depend on charity. You can tap tremendous new sources of capital, and you can make that solution happen in a sustainable way. There's a quote, as an American here, I'll quote Mark Twain, who says it's very hard to explain something to a man whose salary depends on his not understanding it. And I think the challenge that John has is in trying to get companies to bring in values that ought to be important, but are not yet truly valued by the market in financial terms. He is trying to persuade people to understand something that's very important, but which their salaries, and in many cases the vast amounts of wealth they have built up, depend on not understanding it. I don't think we need a new accounting system. I'm not sure we need new corporate structures like the B team would propose. I'm fascinated. Richard Branson, who helped launch the B team and is a wonderful visionary leader and has been, out in front in this idea of companies taking into account social and environmental impact. The last I looked, he owned 3 airlines, which, if I believe, is the mode of transportation that creates the greatest carbon emissions there is. So you have to separate out the realities from the branding, from the things that would be nice if companies believed. And you need to look at the real incentives that drive companies. And so we're seeing companies do marvelous new things. Janet from Nestle will talk a little bit about some of the stuff they're doing in generating new nutritional products that actually help address diseases, in having an impact on water, and having an impact on rural development in poor communities around the world. There are tremendous opportunities for companies to contribute to positive social change and do it with the accounting system and the capitalist system we have today. And I don't think we need to depend on a few visionary leaders like Richard Branson or others to lead the change. Because I think every one of us, if we begin to think about the social and environmental opportunities in the organizations that we are a part of, whether it's an NGO, a nonprofit that can find new ways to work with business through profit-making ventures that meet their mission, or whether it is companies that can find new markets and new products meeting social needs, or whether it is government that can leverage the power of private enterprise through new policies that promote shared value. We don't have to wait for the revolution that will change the capitalist system. We can make changes today, and we don't have time to wait. Shared value is not a perfect solution. Not every social problem will be solved by shared value, and there are indeed times when a company's interest, particularly in short-term profitability, may conflict with what's good for society or good for the world. But there are immense opportunities we can realize now by using the incentive system we have in companies today, but looking at social and environmental issues as business opportunities. So you may or may not think that CSR is dead, but I hope you will vote for the idea of shared value on my side. Thank you.
Very good. See, I'm very impressionistic, so I'm just totally convinced by that, Mark. I'm complete. I don't know what you're going to do, John, to be honest. I'm completely on Mark's side. So, no, John Elkington is going to respond. John Elkington is co-founder, executive chairman of Volans. He's going to speak in defense of CSR. So please welcome John Elkington.
Hooray! Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Barclays, for hosting this evening. Thank you, Matthew, for chairing. Thank you for my co-panelists for your collective wisdom. Full disclosure, when we were first instructed on what the theme might be here this evening, both Mark and I were in violent agreement that we hated the theme, and it seemed to be completely tired. But we came around, and part of the reason is the buzz that was created on Twitter and elsewhere around the theme. It's been quite extraordinary. Now, the reason I'm using a machine is I don't normally do this, but I didn't read the exam paper, and it was only when I got here this evening I suddenly realized I had to pick out these 3 points, which I've now done, but that's why I'm sort of referring to this rather than you doing it from my head. And it's just interesting that Mark very kindly has positioned me as an accountant and interested in accountancy. You may have noticed when the question went out about who knows numbers, I don't know numbers. And I do think that accounting has begun to change. I think economics has begun to change, but that's not the gist of my argument this evening. The first thing I want to say then, and I think Mark actually has very successfully demonstrated the point, that CSR is alive and likely to remain so. I mean, case proven in some ways. But what are we talking about here? For me, corporate social responsibility is a deep-rooted, ongoing conversation across sectors about the role of business in society. It's been with us for a very long time. Very likely it will be with us for a very long time into the future. If you go back into the the 1800s, you would have found the anti-slavery movement, huge implications for business then. The pushback on so-called coffin ships, where people were sent out literally to drown, to collect the insurance, which gave us in the end, after a lot of campaigning, the Plimsoll line. It wasn't called corporate social responsibility at that stage, but it was about how you run business in a civilized way over time. For me, though, CSR is not primarily about accounting. It's not even primarily about things like stakeholder engagement or reporting. It's about transparency, it's about accountability, and it's about sustainability. And each of those is linked, but they're actually distinct. And in the, just in case anyone in the audience raises it, I should just, in the spirit of transparency, just admit that I joined the RSA as a fellow in 1983. I sit on advisory boards for Nestle and for Covestro, just so I'm hopelessly compromised. But all of that said, let me just say, CSR certainly has problems. No one yet, I think, has mentioned Volkswagen or the Dow Jones Sustainability Index's fiasco in a way where VW was put as a sector leader just days before the crisis hit. Some of you have been watching John West, the fish company, just in recent days, promising to get to 100% pole and line caught tuna by 2017, currently at 2%. So does that completely wipe out CSR? Absolutely not. It means John West is semi-criminal, and I can be quoted on that. But you look at other competitors of theirs who are already at 100%. So I don't think a few failures is any reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And it's fascinating at the moment to see companies interested in, and whether they talk about corporate citizenship, CSR, shared value, sustainability, scrambling to understand what the implications of the Sustainable Development Goals and the forthcoming COP21 summit are going to be for their businesses. So this underscores your point, Mark, about the growth opportunities in this space. So in a way, it may seem a rather weird time to have a debate around the question of whether CSR is dead, but I do think there is an important question about whether it is fit for purpose. And that's a big question. One of my favorite magazines, Wired, which I've read since it was launched a very long time ago, distinguishes between language or concepts that are wired, tired, or expired. And my assertion this evening would be CSR is not expired. It's certainly tired in places, and probably even needs defibrillation in some areas. And the question, I think, for all of us, and it's a challenge for the debate this evening, is how do we rewire this really important debate? But I actually think that part of the problem is a problem of mainstreaming. CSR is coming into the mainstream, and when that happens, you get dilution. Second point, and I think this is about, I'll be much briefer on this one. Both Mark and Michael Porter insist that shared value is the way forward. And Michael, on occasion, has talked about it, how it replaces both CSR and sustainability. I really don't think so. I think shared value at its best is about win-win outcomes. Well, that's a double bottom line, and sometimes we like to talk about a slightly wider triple bottom line. But actually, the sustainability agenda is about not just win-win outcomes, it's about system change, it's about disruptive change, it's about win-lose outcomes. And shared value doesn't really embrace that. So I think if we're talking about system change, and we have to, then I think shared value is a really crucial part of the toolkit, but for me is not a sufficient set of answers. I think we don't simply need better capitalism, we need breakthrough capitalism. That's why I'm thrilled to be joined on the platform this evening by Patrick Thomas, who I've known for a very long time, CEO of what used to be biomaterial science, just coming out into the wider world through an IPO as Covestro. Really interesting technology-driven company. Patrick has been briefing hundreds of financial analysts in different parts of the world in recent weeks on sustainability and so on. And part of the reason I'm thrilled that he's here this evening is he's actively involved in areas like not just carbon capture and storage, but carbon capture and utilization. How do you use carbon dioxide to produce polymers rather than just simply pumping it into the ground? And also in areas like how do we move towards zero plastics to landfill and zero plastics to the ocean? My final point is, so I was asked to say, what do I think? What do this lot think? And why am I right? Well, I'm not claiming to be right, but I would say that we're moving into not just an either-or world, but a both-and world. We have to have many different ways of coming at these great challenges and opportunities. And I just want to end by saying why I'm optimistic about CSR. Some of you know I backed out of that space about 8 years ago, so it's really weird that I'm up here championing it. But look at the Global Compact. Lisa Kingo, who I started to work with in 1989 at Novo Nordisk, now taken over there. What fun that's going to be. I think she'll bring real energy to that role. And then there's the B Corporation movement, just launched here, but started in the United States. And I want to conclude with their motto: don't just be the best in the world, be the best for the world. And I think that's a wonderful motto for CSR as it rolls forward. Matthew, back to you.
Thank you, John. Okay, so I've got 2 bottles of wine. Well, I've ordered them, but they are coming. And one is going to go to the first person to make a point, and the other one's going to go to the best point that I hear all evening. So that's good. Oh, yeah, you want the wine, don't you? I can see. Actually, the winner of the first bottle of wine goes to the gentleman over here. So wait till the microphone comes to you when you contribute. Tell us your name and keep it reasonably short and sharp. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Jeff Kendall from Future Fit Foundation. So, Mark, a couple of things you said disturbed me a little bit. The first was we don't have to wait for the revolution, as if we need, the only alternative to business as usual is that we wait for someone else to instigate the revolution. And the second thing was we can do a lot within the incentive systems that we have today. And I think part of the challenge for me with CSV is that it feels close to shareholder value. It's do what we do, but also do some stuff to the side that's good for society. And I question the approach when we see people like British American Tobacco coming out with a Creating Shared Value report. That is this really different from business as usual? And also, Nestle CEO said a few years ago at an event, I really love the CSV framework because it's exactly what Nestle's been doing for the last 150 years. Now, I'm not saying Nestle's a bad company, but I'm saying that do we really think Nestle is truly sustainable and helping to drive the transition at the speed and scale we need to a sustainable future? And is creating shared value enough? Do we not need, to John's point, to create system value? Very
good. I suspect Janet may be responding to those points when she comes in a few minutes. Okay, so there's three people in one row.
Thanks, Matthew. Siva Sabaratnam, Barclays. I'd be interested in your thoughts, Mark and John, on how we could embrace the buy side or the institutional investors to develop and adopt a set of industry-wide standards so that it doesn't take an event like VW for a corporate to drop out of an index or indices, that it makes corporate innovate products and technology or solutions that makes them retain or remain in the index. If that makes sense.
Hi, my name's Matt, and I think at the moment I'm alive. I just wanted to ask something about a point John made about kind of slavery and how that was kind of changed a couple of hundred years ago. And I think kind of the discussion so far has very much centered on like the agency of big corporations. And I think we're really missing some key points in terms of like the relationship between the corporate sector and the state and civil society. And if we're really talking about kind of achieving systems change, such as, you know, the transition from like a slave-based economy to something beyond that, you do need kind of the intervention of civil society and potentially even state action to bring that about. So I guess my question is, how can you talk about system change from the point of view of corporations, which are very much working within a kind of regulatory and cultural system themselves? Like they're not really shaping that system. That was
very good. Thank you. Feel free to applaud the questioners, by the way, any time if you want to. Yeah. Okay. Who's next with the temptation of the wine?
Okay, Steve Martin, University of Worcester. I'm in the emergency ward of planet Earth, and I'm wondering what kind of surgery CSR really needs. I think in conceptual terms it's a good thing, but I think in practice it's pretty awful, as indeed we've seen very recently with Volkswagen, which you touched on, gentlemen. So the practice of CSR, where is the empirical evidence that it is working effectively? And what would you do as surgeons to make it work more effectively? Because I think that's the problem. It is another silo in many organizational systems. And therefore, as a silo, it's rarely heard at board level.
Very good.
Good one.
Okay. We've got a hand here in a rather nice blue suit, and then a gentleman there. I'm desperate for a woman, by the way.
Really complimented. Matthew, you may be desperate for a woman. I can't help there.
No,
I'm
okay.
awfully sorry.
But
My name's
nice
Rob.
Suit.
Thank you for the suit compliment. Rare for me. But my name's Rob Cameron. I'm Executive Director of Sustainability. I am very much alive, but I am conflicted. I know Nestlé's work very, very well indeed. And I have to start by saying that CSV at its best does make a very significant impact. And when CSV is working at its best, it's not about a focus on an outcome. It's about a focus on process. It's a way of thinking about the world. It's a way of thinking about how value is created. Conflicted also because John is my majority shareholder. So, you know, I've kind of got a foot in both camps here. You know, I'm going to pick up... I very much agreed with what Jeff Kendall said. I'm really struck. Mark, you did something very interesting. You positioned your remarks. In fact, what you did was you positioned John. And you spent most of your debating time positioning John in terms of what John thinks and how John has talked about the world. I heard so little about how CSV is going to deal with what the gentleman here just said, which is we are in the emergency ward. We are in the emergency ward on planet Earth, and we have three large constituencies that can address it. One is government, one is civil society, and the other is business. And if we don't see a change in the way that business behaves, if we don't see a change in the way that business contributes towards some real systemic change, we are lost. We need government regulation to change. We need the policies and incentives, as Jeff was saying, to change. But we can't wait for that. In that, you misplaced what CSR is about. CSR at its best is like CSV in a sense. It's about a way of thinking about business. And that's where we need to cling on to something. And to your point, I don't agree that it's CSR that needs to fix itself. It's business that needs to fix itself. It's the economy that's unsustainable, and the economy is largely composed of businesses. So the Volkswagen thing happens because people in Volkswagen had the wrong incentives. That's fundamentally what happened. And people died because of those misplaced incentives. Those incentives that say your bonus depends upon more car sales. We can get away with it if we have the technology. That would not be solved through CSV. It could be solved by a serious conversation about the social purpose of business and the role of business in society. If CSR does anything over the next 20, 40, 60 years, it will be to continue the discussion about the social purpose of business. That's what it's here for.
Karen Holzman. When I think about CSR, I think back to the early 2000s and the corporate social responsibility reports of Starbucks, where they introduced cafe practices, and Chiquita introducing their S8000 framework, and The Gap coming out with their first corporate social responsibility report. And I get very excited about CSV because I love the innovation and I love the win-win, but I worry that can we even achieve CSV when we still haven't achieved that baseline CSR of complying with ILO conventions and complying with basic human rights. And I worry that we throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of losing CSR. And I'm not sure when CSR turned from basic human rights and ILO convention compliance to philanthropy. And we need to figure out how to meet those basic human rights before we can even talk about how do we create win-win with our stakeholders. So I want someone to comment on that.
Very good. Before we go to the gentleman sitting next to you, just to say, Janet, Patrick, you're going to be on in about 5 minutes. I think, Janet, the room's moving a bit against you at the moment. I don't think enlightened self-interest is winning out there. So you've got a hard task.
Drink a bottle of wine, Matt.
Yeah. Whereas Patrick, you're going to be firing into an open goal, which is all you can do is miss. So that's bad. That's hard as well. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm Tony Bird, and I work for the UK Department for International Development. So I was dead, and I'm wondering if I'm a zombie, a bit dead, alive.
That's good.
Yeah. So, as a human, I want a moral, better world. And I think CSR is part of that. But I'm also a pragmatist. And I think the CSV approach, I think what does CSR mean for a business unit in a business? And what can drive real change? And that's where I think the shared value approach, looking at win-wins, developing a better kind of practice, but which is driven by profit as well, is going to deliver more returns. But like I said, maybe I'm a bit of a zombie on this.
Very good. Okay, let's have a couple more comments. Yep.
Rowan Gillis. I think there are quite a few stakeholders of mine living, and possibly some stakeholders in the future coming, who would probably say that corporate social responsibility, i.e. not the tagline, but the notion of corporations having social responsibility, is so nascent, is so minimal, that it hasn't even really been born yet. That it isn't even embryonic. It isn't even fetal. It's embryonic. And so we are a long, long way from death, but we are possibly a long, long way from birth.
That's a nice way. Oh, I like that
one. We're getting metaphysical, folks, and it's not even 7:15.
And this goes way beyond semantics, as I trust some of you appreciate. And what if that little embryo has the potential to have CSR and shared value as an integrated part of its DNA? And what if in this real world, because that's the word that you use most, and I invite you to really listen to how often you use this word real, and what does that really mean to you, including the removal of ambition on your part. But to what extent in the real world does whether that little fetus have both of these as part of its DNA is in the real world up to the two of you on the stage? And what impact would that have on this world and those future people?
Okay, brilliant. I'm glad you kind of didn't go too far with that, them creating an embryo together thing. But anyway, yeah, right at the back of the room. And then we'll bring our seconders in.
Daria from Big Society Capital. I wanted to touch upon about the point of transparency and the role of transparency in all of this. I think one of the surprising things is that if we actually went around the room and asked everyone to name the top 10 companies by social contribution or by CSR budgets, none of us would be able to, especially if we asked 100 people on the street. But we could name the 10 biggest companies by revenue or by profit size. And actually, we need to empower consumers and stakeholders to be able to tell when an organization is delivering social impact and is actually being responsible in terms of all of its internal practices. And at the moment, there's very little transparency about that from companies. So I want to ask the panel to comment on what is the role of consumer empowerment in all of this debate? Because actually, CSR will only really become alive when individuals will hold the companies to account based on their social impact that they deliver.
Very good. Okay. I'm just going to do a little bit of audience participation, Janet, before I bring you in. I'm going to give people insight. And at the RSA, we did a survey, which we haven't yet released, but one of the questions in the survey, it was a big survey, was we asked the general public, what do you think capitalism is broken? And 45% of the general public said yes, that they thought capitalism was broken. So I'm just interested in this room. If you were asked the question, is capitalism broken? How many of you, put your hand up if you'd say yes. Yeah. Okay, so these are quite fundamental questions that we're talking about here tonight. Very good. Right, so our two seconders, it's a really tough task they've got. They've got 5 minutes, they've got some points they wanted to make, and they've got to respond to this incredibly rich conversation. So it's really, really tough. So you're going to go really, really big them up. First, we're going to hear arguing for CSV, arguing for the death of CSR from a global head of public affairs for Nestle, Janet Voot.
Thank you, Matthew. I am going to rebel a little bit, though. I am definitely going to argue in favor of creating shared value. I am not going to argue for the death of CSR. And what I'd like to ask you all to do is bear with me for my 5 minutes and listen to the definition of creating shared value as we use it at Nestle. Then you decide whether it is narrow or broad. But at Nestle, our definition is that for a company to be successful over the long term, and to create value for shareholders, it must create value for society. That is our definition, and we've changed our articles of association to reflect that. And what we have decided for our company, we have a unique ability to create shared value in 3 areas: in nutrition, in water, and in rural development. Nutrition, because that is what consumers need, what people need, and what is good for our business. And we're investing in new forms, new nutrition solutions that are going to help reduce medical costs long term as we renovate and innovate in our portfolio. Water, because there will be no agriculture if we don't deal with water stress around the world. If we don't enable people to have access to clean water, we will not have thriving communities that will be able to buy product. Rural development. Nestle, you know us mostly, cocoa, coffee, dairy. If we do not have successful and sustainable farming communities, we will not have the source of supply that we need to run these businesses. So for us, these societal challenges are intimately related to our business success, and therefore we embed them in the way we do business. And this is what, I believe there was a lady over here who asked, this is what our consumers expect of us. This is what our employees expect. So consumers want to know, where does my food come from and what is its nutritional benefit? So there is a consumer reinforcement of these 3 areas of creating shared value. However, our CEO says that he does think that capitalism or the corporate sector has faced a values crisis over the last 2 to 3 decades. And we would fully agree with that. So we believe that if you are a proponent of creating shared value and any company chooses its areas to create shared value, that must be built on a firm base of compliance with not just national laws, with international conventions, and in our case, our own Nestle corporate business principles, which are based on the 10 principles of the UN Global Compact. We also believe that this creating shared value agenda that does drive, that makes us successful, is intimately linked with our commitments in the area of environmental social, and economic sustainability. So we don't think you can split these agendas. You can't just say, okay, I'll create shared value over here without that firm base. Now, what I think is exciting about creating shared value is there isn't a creating shared value department. There isn't. Creating shared value is the way we do business. We've made commitments in nutrition, water, rural development, environmental sustainability, and compliance. These are owned by different departments and different executive board members. It's the way we do business, and we report transparently on our progress. So what's exciting about creating shared value is it's enterprise-wide, it's embedded in the way people go about their daily business, it inspires the future of research and development. So from my point of view, from a Nestle point of view, creating shared value is alive, but I'm not going to be the one that says CSR is dead, and you have to decide what our definition of creating shared value means. For us, we call it creating shared value, but it is built on that form foundation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janet. So now we're going to hear from Patrick. Patrick Thomas is chairman of Covestro, formerly Bayer Material Science. He's going to be speaking in defense of CSR. Please welcome Patrick Thomas.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I'm going to respond to surgery. I think the planet is in need of surgery. And I like the urgency with which you put your case. So thank you for doing that, because I believe that I run a business that is similarly minded. So let me just deal a little bit with some of the basics first. I'm a great believer in Six Sigma. I think Six Sigma has helped a lot of continuous improvement stuff. I actually place CSV in the same camp as Six Sigma. I think it does some fabulous stuff to incrementally improve business performance. I think that's great, fine, we do that, but we do something else. And I think there are two things that we do which go beyond that. So base case incrementalism. Second point is the triple bottom line. You know, we run a research program of over 200 million a year where we use people, planet, profit as the measure of whether a research project will even continue through its stage gates. At best, you can get a neutral on one of the P's. Otherwise, all have to be positive. Because we believe that by doing that, at the front end of our business, and we actually do it at other stages all the way through procurement and development of businesses and marketing, but by doing that, we're putting in place a set of measures that will guarantee the sustainability of our business for our shareholders. So we don't start developing stuff that we know is going to kick back in the future. We put the stage gate right at the front. And that's sort of, for me, stage two. That's beyond incrementalism is the triple bottom line. But I think you actually have to go further than that. In today's business, I think you have to think well beyond into what I would call, and John would call, breakthrough. And breakthrough is all about how do you think, how do you dream solutions to these major problems that need surgery. And let me just give you one example of how we did that. We actually recognized that within a standard business, you kind of run continuous improvement stuff. That's normal. You have to think about how you can absorb into the business somehow another culture, which is addressing the point that you made. How do you deal with the big problems that we can see? Well, the first, we need to explain those to people, but then you need slightly different people to help you. And that's where collaboration becomes the key. So we set ourselves a very simple target. 6 years ago, I sat down with the team and we said, well, we consume carbon to make molecules that you actually find in your iPhones and in your iPads and in all of the electronic devices and things that you carry around with you. You are never more than 5 meters away from one of our products. You don't know who we are because we supply all the famous names in the world, whether it's sports goods or whether it's automotive goods or whether it's electronic goods, or it doesn't matter. We supply Nestle. We supply thousands of companies around the world with clever materials. And we said, well, most of those materials need carbon. Why can't we make them out of carbon dioxide? Now that switches the whole thinking process into what we call dream mode. So we think, what are the dreams? So we started off with one of the materials we make. We said, why can't we make that from carbon dioxide? Well, catalytically, from a chemistry point of view, it should be possible. So we set up a separate team. We put a team in Aachen University in Germany, 30 of the best postdoctoral researchers in catalytic polymerization. We set them the task of trying to make a material out of carbon dioxide. The original material we targeted them with failed. And I'm a firm believer that unless you fail regularly, you're not trying hard enough, right? Failure is a key element of learning. It's a key element of pushing the boundaries. If we have parties when we fail on a research project for the simple reason that it frees that resource up to do something new and more exciting, because we always have a waiting list of dreams. One of the dreams that we had was this carbon dioxide idea. Actually, the researchers came up with a different material we could make with carbon dioxide, and it's actually the material you're sitting on right now. You're sitting on a polyurethane foam cushion. You sit on the same cushion in your car. You sleep on the same material if you've bought a mattress from IKEA. But what we found was the way of incorporating 30% carbon dioxide as the carbon backbone for that material. That's what I call bringing dreams into reality. You don't get there through incrementalism. You get there by setting yourself ridiculously difficult objectives. And to answer your question, you do the impossible operation to try and save and make a real difference. IKEA love the concept. They want to get it into their mattresses as fast as possible. We're building a huge commercial scale unit right now to manufacture those materials. That's just one example in a whole range of markets where we work, where we believe you have to make breakthroughs. These are fundamental shifts in how you think about technology. And it's a mind shift. Stop thinking about carbon dioxide as a waste. Think about it as a feedstock for making useful objects. The thought of sleeping on 30% of carbon dioxide that came out of a power station chimney is less than 1 year away. We're nearly there. We've got all of the tests done. The companies that make furniture and car seats, they're totally happy with the product. But it's without that breakthrough mentality and setting up collaborations with other people who think fundamentally differently, you will not get the surgery to work. It's only between universities, businesses, other businesses who have interests in the same area. You've just got to work it differently. Incrementalism just simply is not enough. And
Thank you, Patrick. No, that was brilliant.
I'll just shut up. That was brilliant. I was going to say, I'll just shut up.
Sorry,
Patrick, that was
Matthew?
super. That was superb. You went 2 minutes over. So, Janet, I'm going to give you a bonus minute.
Okay, we just wanted to say, Mark and I are sitting down here going, that's the most perfect example of creating shared value we've ever heard.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, if you think what Nestle is doing in nutrition, we're rethinking nutrition. We're trying to figure out investing lots and lots in research and development to imagine the future of nutrition as part of the prevention paradigm, reducing healthcare costs. Isn't that the same? So we don't think CSV is incremental at all. That's the only thing.
Absolutely. Okay. It's all kicking off on stage. I might let it carry on, but you're there, and you've all got really interesting points as well. So who's going to go next? Yeah, jolly good. There's somebody here.
Thank you, Andrew Wilson. Patrick, I thought that was an excellent intervention, very inspiring. I'm sorry, I do feel, CSR is very much alive. I think we do need to make a distinction, even if it's a false distinction. And I think what I wanted to do, just to build on Patrick's point, was to express the urgency of the need and the scale of the challenge, not with some of the analogies we've heard before, but with some hard data. When I was born in the late 50s, I emphasize the very late 50s, there were 3 billion people on the planet. We all know in October 2011, we reached the milestone of 6 billion people. If I'm fortunate enough to live my life expectancy to my 80s, there'll be 9 billion people on the planet. We are just consuming resources at such a rate that we have to have something other than incremental change. I think CSR and the kind of innovations that we've heard about is what's needed. The systemic change that Rob Cameron was talking about. We have to take action now, lest we go down as the generation that royally messed up things, not only for our own generation, but all future generations. We must act now.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes, I know.
So just before you come in, so I'm going to annoy everybody now by saying where I think we've kind of got to in this debate, because I wasn't sure about the issue before, but it seems to me a bit clearer. And when we get to the end, of course, Mark and John can clarify this, but it seems to me the way the audience are understanding this debate is it's kind of enlightened self-interest starting with profit on the one side, and it's paradigm shift starting with social responsibility on the other side. Now, that may not be how you want to describe it, but that's what I'm hearing from the room. So let's carry on the debate. But it seems to me, as an audience, you're clarifying where this dividing line is, which is fantastic. So, yeah.
Hi, my name's Finland. I actually work for FSG, just so everyone knows my allegiance. So I'm actually dead, unfortunately. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to say that shared value, and I work on this every day and I'm passionate about it. And I truly believe that it's a real vehicle for change. And the example we hear from the Alive Corner was a perfect example, as Janet said, of shared value. Thinking creatively, using the opportunity that business have for innovation, the resources that they have to put behind creating solutions. Fine, it's for money, but it is to address a real challenge. But this is all about products and services. Shared value also goes beyond that to say, well, actually, what can we do in our value chain? How do we address environmental issues? And also, how do we support and develop local economy? How do we make sure that the suppliers that are working with Nestle are actually based in Ghana and not just things aren't being exported from outside of the country? And then the next level of shared value, which is actually the most complicated and most difficult, is systems change. And at FSG right now, we're having a lot of discussion around what does systems change mean? What is a systems change leader? And we're not just looking at the private sector to create this change. We also do a lot of work with CSR companies and foundations and with government and bilateral donors, because we know that there is no one organisation that has the silver bullet. And systems change also requires policy change, it requires change on regulation, but it also requires behaviour change. People don't even sometimes know what's right for them and what they need. And so we at FSG and Nestle, and other organisations that are getting behind the concept of shared value do see it as a complex, comprehensive approach that is building on, ideas that have come before us, and definitely nod our head to that. But it's not as reductionist and incremental as it's being made out here. And I just wanted to clarify that. And I also love working for FSG.
That was very good.
OK. Let's take the two hands. There's loads of hands going up, so we haven't got that much time. So try and keep the comments to about a minute and a half maximum, please. Very good. Don't forget to say your name and what side of the debate you're on.
Thank you. I'm Callum, and I work in development policy, and I'm on the Alive side, and I'm going to say why. And I think it's really important, first of all, that we've mentioned nutrition, which was talked about on the panel. Globally, nearly 1 in 4 under 5s are stunted, which means they've got a low height for their age, and 52 million children are wasted, which means they've got a low weight for their age. And there's evidence to suggest that it's a contributing factor to nearly 45% of under 5 infant mortality rates. And the critical period is the first 1,000 days, and that's from inception until they're about 2 years old. So the main target audience for nutrition is children, but of course mothers as well. And malnourished mothers often have malnourished children. So what the focus on, and one of the best interventions, is maternal breastfeeding. And there are incidents where organisations have been in hospitals, and I'm not suggesting this is Nestle, but there have been incidents with organisations that have been in hospitals trying to sell nutritional products at the extent that maternal breastfeeding is not a scaled-up intervention, and those interventions therefore aren't taken forward, and it's not solving the cause of the problem. So I'm a really, really big supporter of private sector involvement in development. I think it's absolutely essential, but it has to target the right levels, and that's why I think the key word in this debate is responsible, because there can be occasions when it's not, and that can be detrimental.
Thank you very much. And then pass the mic forward.
Hi, my name is Tommy Stadlin. I've just written a book about the death of CSR with John Brown, so I'm definitely on that side. Just typed it up. Work quickly.
Okay.
So in the book, we talk about Enron, and you all remember Enron. It committed the biggest corporate scandal in history, and that same year won pretty much every CSR award going. And fast forward to the VW scandal, and as some people have mentioned, those guys went out and they were top of the CSR league tables. And I know we've mentioned it a little bit, but I think we should really grapple with that, because isn't that just a sort of damning indictment of CSR? They were top of the league tables, and now they're dead. CSR has had its moment, it's had its ability to be the mechanism by which business interacts with society, and only about 20% of people trust business leaders to tell the truth. So I think CSR has had its day, and I think it's dead.
Thank you very much. Before we go to this part of the room, panel, we've got a question from Twitter from Hannah Gilbert, who says, has CSR struggled as more corporates need to mitigate the risks of resource scarcity? So that's a question thrown in from Twitter. OK, back here. Yeah.
Hi, Louisa Harris. I work at Grant Thornton. I very much believe CSR is alive, although I don't want to get lost in semantics because I think the definition can evolve. I'd like to come back to materiality. It's a big concern for me working in CSR because I think often businesses use that as a scapegoat where you can focus only on responsibility is only limited to the areas of your business impact. And faced with the complexities of the challenges that are going on in the world at the moment, surely we must look beyond materiality and say that actually we have a responsibility to act as citizens instead.
Very good. Thank you very much. Yep.
I am Hannah Gilbert, but I had a further point.
Well, you're the person who just tweeted.
I'm the person who tweeted about risk mitigation.
Well, I'm not sure about that.
That's entrepreneurial. But my second point...
But you're not going to make the same point you just made in Twitter, are you?
Different point. Is actually addressed to Mark and Janet. You both were quite careful to frame your comments around time. So, Mark, you made a reference to companies often become conflicted when they have short-term incentives. And Janet, you were very careful as well to talk about Nestlé's long-term time horizon. So I have a question around the sort of systemic issues with reference to capitalism and how perhaps our current mode of capitalism is squeezing out these ESG factors and concepts of shared value and corporate social responsibility.
OK, thank you. Then we're right to the back of the back row.
Tom Fox from Unlimited. I think CSR is alive, but it's not as healthy as I'd like it to be. About 15 years ago, I was working on CSR and I became disillusioned with it because there was endless talk about the business case for CSR. And it just felt like this was a kind of a holy grail. All we had to do was find this business case and everything would be fine. And of course, the truth was the business case is patchy. It depends what industry you're in, depends how close to concerned consumers you are. It depends, like Nestlé, whether you need access to scarce resources, whether you need a license to operate in certain places. So I felt, well, I thought maybe 15 years on we would have moved on, but it feels like it hasn't. It feels like the business case is just as patchy as it was. It feels like shared value is an expression of that. As John says, it feels like that's where the business case is, where there's a win-win. So my question is, how do we get beyond? I now work on social entrepreneurship because I feel like having a social purpose at the heart of the business potentially is more helpful. I'm yet to be convinced that CSR can evolve into something more substantial.
Very good. Yeah, and then there's a lady down here in a sparkly top.
Hi, Kate Turner, also from Business in the Community. I sympathise with a lot of what the lady from Grant Thornton just said around materiality and semantics, and I really think that I came here thinking that CSR was dead because CSR is far too much about social and not enough about material issues. At Business in the Community, we're always talking to our companies about practical action. They don't really care what we're calling it. They just want to know what they can do to achieve sustainable growth in the long term. So I think, in a way, maybe we need to phrase the debate around the output, not around the semantics.
Very good. Mark, John, the moment of truth is appearing.
Thank you.
Is closing
my
in.
name is Rachel. I work for a small charity called Student Hubs. We work with university students around England who are engaged in volunteering, social action, social enterprise. And I'm alive. I guess I'm thinking that a lot of the conversation today has been about the long term and the fact that this is probably a bit of a long journey that we're on. And because I work with students, I'm interested in what businesses need to be doing to take whatever decisions are being made at the top about this and actually getting them down into kind of graduate recruitment level to really think about the type of people that you need in businesses, because they are probably still going to be solving these problems in kind of 20, 30 years. And given that the kind of millennial generation has been shown to be more likely to get engaged in practical action and volunteer rather than just throw money at problems, I think that kind of needs to be a key consideration as well in the debate.
Very good. I think the founder from Student Hubs is actually here, funnily enough. I can see him. But anyway, yeah, he's back. Right, what else? Yes.
Martin Rich, also from the Future Fit Foundation. I don't know whether I'm dead or alive. I'm loving the conversation. I'm loving the concept of businesses that are changing it and embedding this. So I guess I'm for CSRV. We've talked a lot about the dinosaurs that have died, Enron and others. We've talked about businesses changing, and Nestle is a company that's existed for a very long time and is changing. I'm curious that we haven't actually mentioned the real game changers who are defining the future. Tesla, Uber, lots of organizations like this who are coming along. I have no real idea where they stand on this debate. They are the companies who right now, today, are actually defining what the future is going to look like. So I'd be really interested in reflections, if there was time. Where do these companies come into what we're talking about here?
I think it's a brilliant question, and actually I would add to that, the major Silicon Valley companies have arguably more power than any companies have ever had in history. Yeah. So that, maybe we should be talking a bit more about these guys as well in this debate. So, yes.
Hi, this is a question for Janet. I was just wondering how Nestle can expect the general public to buy into their shared values of reducing healthcare costs when some of the products that you produce, such as baby food to consumers that don't necessarily need them and that definitely can't afford them, or chocolate bars and sugary cereals that contribute to obesity, how you can get people to buy into your shared values?
Now, I'm going to let Janet, you can respond to that. If that's directly at you, so you can respond to that briefly.
Well, I think many people don't know Nestle as well as they think they do. So if you look, it's a 150-year-old company that is 93 billion Swiss francs in size. It is not small, 340,000 employees around the world. In terms of the product portfolio is vast. Within that vast product portfolio, we have infant nutrition products, we have confectionery, we have cereals. What we have made is very explicit commitments to reduce salt, fat, and sugar in those products. What we try to make sure is that the version that we put on the market, because people do still like confectionery, has better portion guidance, better labeling in terms of what's inside. We are investing heavily in reducing the things that should be reduced, salt, fat, sugar, increasing the things that should be increased, whole grains and vegetables. I think as we transparently label, people will better understand that. And then the debate around infant nutrition, what we do is we practice what we preach. We've just launched a fairly world-class maternity protection policy, which covers 6 months leave so that those women who want to stay home and the fathers and adopted parents want to stay home and the mother wants to breastfeed, she's able to do that. So if you look at what we're actually doing, I think, and in an interconnected world, slowly but surely, the consumer who can use their iPhone and look and find out what's in a product, what farmer it comes from, what are the components in that product, will better understand who Nestle is and what we really do. So Great. You can hold us accountable.
That's fine. We're not having a debate about Nestle, but I thought it was important to get Janet's point of view to respond to your point. Okay, I'm going finally right to the back of the room.
Dwayne Baraka, I run a consultancy called Value CSR. I think CSR is alive, but looking from an outsider's perspective or a standard business perspective, it kind of looks like it's dead. And for a couple of reasons, I think. There's only half a dozen companies that I know of that talk about specifically how much value is created from CSR or CSV for that company. And so that's only enlightened self-interest. But having said that, I think CSR is better when it's a question. So I guess my question is, who is it creating value for, CSV in particular, and in what proportion? And how do we decide among companies who's doing that better than the other? Because very few companies calculate the value that it creates for themselves, let alone the value it creates or the harm it prevents for others outside the company.
Great, thank you. Okay, so you've now got your chance to vote again. I know that the panel have kind of subvert this is CSR dead, but you kind of know what this debate is about. So, vote in terms of the sides of this debate, which I think have become actually clearer as the evening has gone on. It's been absolutely fascinating. So we're going to take them in reverse order to how we had them at the beginning. So that means we're going to start from John. He's got the incredibly tough task of reminding of his arguments, responding to what he's heard in only 3 minutes. So for the last time this evening, please give it up to John Elkington.
Hooray. Thank you. Let me go slightly personal to start with. Let's ask ourselves, who is saying currently that CSR is dead? Tommy, thanks very much for your input. John Brown is somebody I immensely admired. I wrote a piece about him in Time magazine in 2004, celebrating what he'd done in climate change. I don't think Lord Brown has ever fully admitted the responsibility he had for what happened with Deepwater Horizon. And I only put that on the agenda because values, however much they're embraced by companies, drift. Think about Barclays. Think about the UK banks. You know, you can have great companies, and over time we see drift. So I think this is a fundamental problem, and I don't think simply looking for win-win outcomes addresses that responsibility issue, which I think it was Callum who addressed that. There was a point about slavery. I may have given the impression that slavery was solved, and I absolutely did not mean to do that. If you think about, there was a really interesting couple of programs in this country recently that looked at how we got away from slavery, and it cost £17 billion over 60 years. It's about 2% of GDP over a very long time. That's small beer compared to climate change. And I think what Patrick was beginning to get into, the questions of how can business play into that really fundamentally transformative game. We share in the CSR field with CSV, shared value, a fundamental problem. And that as human beings, we play with language. We're fashion conscious. You know, black is in, black is out. White is in, white is out. Hot skirts are, mini skirts are hot. And then miniskirts are dead. And then we're told CSR is dead. Well, in a sense, forgive the technical term, but bugger that. We're going to have to fight for our language, whatever it is, but in the process, we're going to have to redefine it. In the end, it's young people will define what language actually goes forward, and I hope that they will at least have enough respect and time and attention to look at what we've actually managed to achieve today and the failures. And you know, if we fail on this side of this, we'll have a wonderful failure party, just to pick up on what Patrick was talking to. And this is a sincere thing. Your colleague, Mark, from FSG, when I listened to some of the stuff happening on the system side, I made a mental note that next year I'm going to do a course on, I don't know how it can be done, and how I'm going to squeeze it into the diary, Sam, I don't know. But I'm going to do a course on the system elements of shared value, because it's something I really do need to know more about. And the point earlier on about how do we combine all of these different things into a combined, better, stronger proposition, I think that's the fundamental challenge we face.
Very good, thank you. So, Mark, it kind of feels to me as though actually, in a sense, we've recast this proposition. It's almost less is CSR dead, but is CSV enough? That seems to be in some ways what we're talking about. So this is your chance to defend that proposition if you choose to defend that proposition. Please keep voting. We want a really good vote. You go to hashtag Barclays debate, Team Mark or Team John. We'll be telling you the result of that in just a few moments. So, for the last time, please give it up for Mark Kramer.
Thank you. I do think the debate has gotten confused, and in a sense that's not surprising, as John and I are trying to accomplish largely the same things in the world. But we have approached it from somewhat different ways, but there is tremendous overlap. I think the idea that we should have a baby together is a new thought. I won't go to it. But I think the concept of CSR may be a wonderful concept. And the idea of dialogue over centuries about the role of business in society is a marvelous dialogue to have. But as many people in this room said, you've got to look at the reality of it, you know, and how it works in practice is very rarely getting to the culture and purpose and fundamental strategy of the company. And to really create change, to really enable companies to become vehicles for social progress rather than harm, you have to get to the core of the business. You've got to get to the CEO. You've got to get to the strategy. There are some companies where CSR gets to the CEO, but they're not many. And I think the virtue of the shared value approach, which focuses on competitive strategy, which focuses on the core of the business, which speaks to the CEO and the board, is to put in front of them the idea of opportunity rather than responsibility. You know, if I have a responsibility, I'll do it. If I have an opportunity, I will invest in it. I'll seize it. I'll run for it. And it is framing what is sometimes very much the same thing as opportunity for competitive advantage that has given, I believe, shared value its power, and where it has something to offer that CSR, not in theory, but CSR in practice, has failed to do.
Thank you, Mark. Well, I think it's been absolutely brilliant debate. 2 bottles of wine, one for you asking the first question, one for you for the kind of weird baby question. It just seems to have struck a chord. You know what I'm going to say, panel, because I'm going to be asking you to thank our panel in a minute. But you know what? I just think the questions we've had, the contribution have been brilliant. So I want us 5 to applaud them. Yeah?
Absolutely.
You've been absolutely brilliant. So, at the beginning of the evening, it wasn't actually, who said 51-49? That was you, wasn't it? That's wrong. 55 for 40, I know, but you're an accountant. Anyway, so it was 55-45 in John's favour when we first asked this question, is CSR dead? He was winning that 55-45. Now, with the votes cast, John has won by 75-25. So, I declare John and Patrick the winners.
Oh dear. Thank you.
It's been a brilliant debate. Thank you to Barclays for enabling this debate to happen. I've really enjoyed it. It just remains for me to ask you to join me in thanking our fantastic panel, Mark Kramer, John Elkington, Janet Voot and Patrick Thomas.